Everyone asks the same question. What happens if Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz? It is the simple version of the crisis, a narrow passage, a line of tankers, a red warning zone between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean. But the more unsettling possibility is not a clean blockade at all. It is something murkier, a partial, messy, deniable shipping war, where the strait remains technically open, yet every voyage through it becomes a calculation of fear. Picture a tanker moving toward Hormuz as price boards flicker, naval silhouettes appear on the horizon, port cranes wait in the dark. Insurance documents move faster than the ship itself. No single image proves that global trade has stopped, but each signal can change the cost of passage. That is why the 2026 escalation turned Hormuz from a regional flashpoint into a global risk story, not because anyone can safely predict the next military move, but because modern shipping can be strained before the world sees dramatic footage. The most dangerous part of Hormuz may not be only the narrow waterway, it may be the invisible system around it: insurers, brokers, sanctions desks, naval patrols, port operators, banks, and energy buyers. In this system, a ship can be free to sail and still commercially trapped. To understand why this narrow passage can unsettle people far from the Middle East, start with the geography. The Strait of Hormuz is the maritime gateway between the Persian Gulf and the wider Indian Ocean. Iran sits to the north. Oman and the coastline of the United Arab Emirates sit to the south. Around them are ports, energy terminals, naval facilities, and commercial routes packed into a small area of water. That confirmed fact is simple. What follows from it is more complicated. A tanker leaving the Gulf does not just sail out into open ocean. It passes through a corridor watched by governments, monitored by insurers, tracked by traders, and priced by markets. React not only to what has happened, but to what might happen next. The cargo may be oil, gas, refined products, or something connected to the wider energy trade. The destination may be Asia, Europe, or somewhere else through a chain of buyers and contracts. But the risk is global because modern trade is built on confidence. Confidence that ships will arrive, confidence that crews will sail, confidence that ports will keep working, confidence that cargoes can be insured, financed, and delivered on time. This is why Hormuz matters even to people who never think about shipping lanes. If perceived risk around the strait rises, the effects can move outward. Energy buyers may look for alternatives. Ship owners may ask whether a voyage is worth the danger. Charterers may demand different terms. Insurers may review coverage. Ports may tighten procedures. Manufacturers may worry about input costs. Consumers may eventually feel pressure through fuel, electricity, transport, or the prices of goods that depend on energy-intensive supply chains. None of this requires a dramatic image of a closed sea lane. The public usually imagines one decisive moment: ships stopped in place, navies facing each other, headlines announcing that the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked. That is one scenario, and it is the one that dominates the internet. Videos ask what happens if Iran blocks Hormuz, or whether a missile crisis could pull the region into something larger. But a hidden shipping war does not need to wait for that moment. Markets can react earlier. A vessel seizure, a warning broadcast, a reported drone or missile threat, a naval alert, a delay at port. A rerouting decision or a surge in insurance concern can all send the same message. Passage is still possible, but it is no longer normal. There is also noise around the topic. Online attention can push Hormuz beside unrelated breakout subjects, from futuristic technology to medical innovation, simply because trend systems notice momentum. That is a warning. The story has to be told carefully. The evidence is stronger for the broad risk than for many specific predictions. Fact, theory, disputed claim, and speculation have to stay separate. So the sharper question is not only whether the Strait of Hormuz can be closed, it is this: if no one fully closes the strait, how can trade still begin to freeze? To see it, follow one tanker. Not a real named vessel, but a composite, a way to understand the decisions that gather around a ship. It approaches the Gulf during a crisis. On the chart, the route still exists. The water is not a wall. The tanker can turn toward Hormuz, join the traffic lanes, and continue toward a loading terminal or a refinery contract. But before the captain ever sees the narrow passage, the voyage has already entered a room full of people who are not on the bridge. The owner wants to know whether the ship is still worth sending. The charterer wants to know whether the cargo will arrive on time, and whether the price agreed earlier still makes sense now. The crew manager has to think about the people on board, their contracts, their families, the possibility that a routine voyage is becoming something else. The insurer reviews the area, the warnings, the policy language, and the extra cost of entering a zone that markets may now see as dangerous. Then the bank appears, quietly but powerfully. A valuable cargo often moves through layers of financing, credit, guarantees, and paperwork. If the risk changes, the money behind the voyage may change too. The buyer at the other end asks whether there is another source. The port authority may tighten procedures. A security advisor may recommend a delay, a different route, or added precautions. None of this looks like a blockade, but every step adds friction. This is where war risk premiums matter. In plain language, a war risk premium is the extra price attached to sailing through danger. It is not the same thing as a missile, a mine, or a military order. It is a market signal that says, this voyage now carries more uncertainty, and uncertainty has to be paid for. The ship may be physically able to move, but the liability of moving can rise quickly. If that cost is too high, or if coverage is unclear, a voyage that looks possible on a map can become commercially difficult. This is the hidden battlefield behind Hormuz. Not only warships and aircraft, but emails, clauses, phone calls, radio warnings, and route decisions. A captain may wait for instructions. A charterer may demand more money. A crew may need reassurance before entering the area. An insurer may ask for fresh information. A port may slow arrivals while it checks security conditions. A buyer may start searching for supply that does not require the same passage. The effect can spread without a single dramatic image. A few delayed sailings can make schedules less reliable. Less reliable schedules can make cargoes more expensive. More expensive cargoes can push buyers to hedge, stockpile, or look elsewhere. And once enough people begin acting defensively, the system starts to tighten around itself. That is why the Strait of Hormuz is not only a strip of water, it is a confidence machine. It works when owners, crews, insurers, banks, ports, and buyers believe that passage is manageable. It falters when they begin to wonder who will be the next vessel in the wrong place at the wrong time. And in a shipping war, the most powerful move may not be sinking a ship. It may be making everyone afraid to be the next ship. The first answer to a threatened strait is simple: build another way out. On paper, this is the bypass dream. If tankers are nervous about Hormuz, move oil and gas through pipelines. If ports inside the Gulf feel exposed, expand ports outside it. If ships cannot wait safely offshore, build storage hubs inland or along safer coasts. If sea lanes become political bargaining chips, shift more cargo onto roads, railways, and overland export corridors. That dream is why videos about giant plans to bypass the Strait of Hormuz can break out online. A title like "The $100 billion Plan to Bypass the Strait of Hormuz" sounds like a secret escape hatch from geopolitics, but that number should be treated as a media frame, not a verified cost. The important point is not whether one headline price is exact. The important point is that governments, energy companies, ports, and investors have spent years thinking about the same uncomfortable question. What happens when the world's most famous choke point looks too risky? The attraction is obvious. A pipeline does not need to pass through a narrow waterway. An alternative port can keep loading cargo even when tankers are avoiding a danger zone. Storage gives buyers and exporters time. Overland routes can turn geography into a kind of insurance. They promise continuity, and in a crisis, continuity is power. But the hidden catch is that a bypass is not the same thing as freedom. It is a different kind of dependency. Pipelines need protection, maintenance, financing, and political permission along their route. Ports outside the strait still need dredging, crews, tugboats, customs systems, security, fuel, and enough depth for the right ships. Storage tanks are useful only if cargo can get in and out when it matters. Roads and rail lines can move some goods, but they can also meet bottlenecks at borders, terminals, and long desert crossings. Even when a route exists, it may not carry the same volumes, serve the same customers, or move with the same flexibility as open water. A bypass can reduce exposure to one risk while creating exposure to another. So the bypass dream changes the shipping war rather than ending it. It moves pressure from one map point to another. Instead of watching only the strait, traders watch pipeline terminals. Insurers ask whether cargo changes hands. Banks ask whether contracts still apply if a shipment moves through a different route. Port operators ask whether sudden traffic can be handled without delays. Governments ask whether new corridors create new political leverage for the countries that control them. This is where Hormuz becomes bigger than Hormuz. A country with a credible alternative route can negotiate from a stronger position. A buyer with access to stored supply can wait longer before panic buying. A producer with only one practical exit has fewer options. In a hidden shipping war, the winner is not always the side with the loudest threat. Sometimes it is the side that can keep moving quietly while everyone else recalculates risk. And yet, no bypass erases the region around it. A route around a choke point may still pass through tense politics, exposed infrastructure, fragile contracts, or security worries of its own. The promise is resilience, not invincibility. The bypass dream is real as a strategy, but dangerous as a fantasy. Every bypass route solves one problem and creates another. But the deeper question is more uncomfortable. Who gains power when the normal sea route becomes uncertain? This is where a Strait of Hormuz crisis stops looking like a single event and starts looking like a hidden war nobody has to declare. In the public imagination, the drama begins when someone announces a blockade. Ships stop, navies move, markets panic. But in the real world, pressure can build in smaller steps, with signals that are limited, reversible, and sometimes deliberately unclear. A patrol appears closer than usual. A warning is broadcast over maritime channels, a vessel is inspected, a tanker changes course, a port tightens procedures, an insurer asks for another review. None of these things by itself has to mean the strait is closed. Together, they can make every voyage feel like a decision made under threat. That is the hidden shipping war. It is not one clean line on a map, it is a contest over confidence. One layer is visible and confirmed. Naval forces operate in and around the Gulf. Governments issue maritime guidance. Sanctions regimes affect shipping behavior, and companies constantly reassess risk. Those are not theories, they are part of how this region has worked for years. Another layer is disputed. Claims about interference, targeting, intimidation, or responsibility for specific incidents can become contested almost immediately, especially during a fast-moving crisis. In that zone, attribution matters, evidence matters, public statements matter. A third layer is speculative. What might happen if cyber disruption hit port systems, if navigation data became unreliable, if threats to energy infrastructure changed shipping schedules, or if a limited confrontation spiraled into wider commercial fear? Those are scenarios, not facts, but scenarios can still influence real decisions when the stakes are high. The danger is that all three layers can blur together in the minds of traders, ship owners, crews, and governments. A confirmed warning can amplify a disputed claim. A disputed claim can inspire a speculative scenario. A speculative scenario can become expensive before it becomes true. This is why the familiar question, can Iran block Hormuz, is too narrow for the moment. The sharper question is how many ways a choke point can be stressed before anyone admits it is being treated like a blockade. Pressure does not have to mean sinking ships. It can mean making captains wait for instructions, making banks hesitate over financing, making cargo buyers look for backup supply, making insurers rewrite terms, and making governments wonder whether a commercial incident is actually a political signal. The tools of pressure are not all military in the traditional sense. They can include naval presence, maritime warnings, inspections, seizures, sanctions enforcement, cyber risk, disputed claims of GPS interference, and threats against energy infrastructure. Listing those tools is not the same as accusing any one actor of using all of them. In a crisis, the honest answer is often, this is confirmed, this is disputed, this is theory, and this is speculation. That distinction is not a technical detail, it is the difference between analysis and rumor. Political analysts also disagree about the deeper pattern. Some argue that US-Iran dynamics create an escalation trap, where each side tries to deter the other, but every deterrent move looks like preparation for something larger. Others reject that framing and argue that the system is dangerous precisely because leaders usually know the costs of a full closure. Therefore, try to stay below that line. Both views are interpretations, not certainties, but both point to the same fragile reality. Hormuz is a place where a signal meant to be limited can be read as a threat, where a commercial delay can become a strategic message, and where a mistake in judgment can travel faster than the ships themselves. That is why the 2026 escalation turned Hormuz into a global risk story, not because the world knew exactly what would happen next, but because it could see how many invisible systems were already leaning toward caution. So if everyone knows a full closure would be dangerous, why does the system still keep drifting toward moments where one mistake can move markets worldwide? That is the question left behind by every crisis in the Strait, not because the answer is simple, but because the system around Hormuz has become so large, so expensive, so difficult to replace that the world keeps accepting a dangerous bargain. The passage remains open most of the time, ships keep moving, contracts keep being signed, ports keep loading cargo, and then, when tension rises, everyone suddenly remembers how much confidence is required for ordinary trade to look ordinary. The hidden shipping war is not only a contest over water, it is a contest over belief. Do ship owners believe their vessels can pass without becoming part of a political message? Do insurers believe the risk is measurable enough to cover? Do crews believe the voyage is worth taking? Do banks, brokers, and cargo buyers believe a delivery date is still real? Do governments believe they can signal strength without pushing the system past the point where markets panic? A total blockade is the image that dominates public imagination. It is clean, dramatic, and easy to understand, but Hormuz can hurt global trade before that line is ever crossed. Fear can raise the cost of moving, insurance can become more cautious, routes can shift, tankers can wait, ports can tighten procedures, buyers can search for alternatives, even if those alternatives are slower, more expensive, or incomplete. Political signaling can make every normal decision feel like a gamble. That is why the 2026 escalation mattered beyond the region itself. It made Hormuz feel less like a distant maritime problem and more like a global systems risk, not because any single outcome was guaranteed, and not because every warning should be treated as certainty. The facts are narrower than the fears, but the fear itself can become part of the mechanism. In shipping, perception is not separate from reality. It changes prices, delays choices, and tests the patience of everyone connected to the route. This is the part that rarely appears in the most dramatic versions of the story. The first sign of trouble may not be a burning ship or a closed channel. It may be a risk committee asking for another review, a charterer hesitating before signing, an insurer changing the conversation, a captain waiting for guidance, a port preparing for disruption, a government issuing a careful warning that every trader reads twice. By the time the public sees the crisis, the hidden war may already have moved through paperwork, phone calls, shipping screens, and private decisions. The strait may still be open, but confidence may already be damaged, so Hormuz does not have to break the world by closing completely. It can shake global trade by making the ordinary act of passage feel uncertain. And that leaves the final question. If the world has spent decades building around Hormuz, why is so much still forced through one narrow gate? In the next documentary, we follow another route, pipeline, or choke point that could become the next pressure point in the global system.